Okay, thank you for the notice. So when Ken approached me about doing something, I wanted to do something about literacy and about reading, because I love books. I love them now. But why? Why is it important to love books, or why do I love books? When I was a kid, this is me on the left. I think that's probably like fourth or fifth grade. You see how cool my glasses were? I had the little thing that's wrapped to the glasses so they don't fall off. Super cool. Any of you have pictures like this? But when I was a kid, I did not like reading. I actually hated reading. Reading was the least favorite thing that I wanted to do. You could have me do all types of stuff, but I did not want to read because I thought it was boring. I thought it was whack. I was like, why do I want to read a book for? That's not necessarily for nerds or squares, because I was a nerd and I still am a proud nerd, but I just wasn't into it. And that was generally my thinking and my feeling. I didn't know at the time that there were some deeper reasons for why I was not feeling it. And I don't know if any of you are feeling that, but if you've ever felt that way, I hope to persuade you with this talk. So there's a educator by the name of Rudine Bishop Sims, and she came up with this quote that said, "Books are windows and mirrors." So if you look at a mirror, you'll see a reflection of yourself. If you look at a window, you'll be able to see through the glass. You'll be able to see what's outside. Books, if you see a picture of yourself or your auntie or your grandmother or your father or yourself, anyone basically that you know from your family or your neighborhood or your block, that's like a mirror. You're saying, oh, that's me, or that looks like so-and-so, or that looks like someone that I can relate to, someone that I know, maybe even a story that's very, very similar to yours or to your life. Whereas if you see a book that's a window is like being able to peek into someone else's life. It's like if you've ever been standing in your room and you look out the window and you can see what other people are doing in the neighborhood, you can get a glimpse of what's happening on the block. And getting a book that's a window into someone else's life is important too, because then you get to see how are these other people living. You know, how do they make food, how do they speak, what's important to them, what is their family structure. Those things, having a mirror which reflects you and having a window which allows you to see others, are really important. And I was born in 1979, so when that picture that's on the right there that you see of the library, that's a really old picture from the 80s, and that's how libraries looked. They were not as colorful. They didn't really have as big of a kids book section. They had them, but they were not reflective of me. So I felt like, why bother? So this is what was cool to me: hip hop. I don't know if any of you are into hip hop now. There's so many different types of cool things to be into now, but when I was a kid, hip hop was it for me. Graffiti art is a part of hip hop. There are several pillars of hip hop culture, and I think a lot of people will think of hip hop as just like the music, you know, and that's a big part of it, huge part of it, but it's not the only part. So rap, rhyming, MCing, you know, nowadays there's so many different genres. Trap is a genre of hip hop. Those are all part of the lyrical, the spoken music. But there are other parts. Graffiti art is a part of hip hop culture. DJing is a part of hip hop culture, and breakdancing or b girls or b boys are also a part of the culture. Can everybody hear me? Okay. You just
Yeah, we can hear you.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
So on the left, this image right there, this is of the Source magazine. This started off as like a little paper zine that was just maybe like 4 pages, and it turned into a magazine. And the people that are on the cover there, although you might know their faces now, you might not know who they are now. They were precursors to some of the rappers that we know today, because they were influenced by these older people who, when I was in 91, I was 11 years old. So these people were adults to me already. So the Source had a whole lot of rappers, you know, MCs, all of that. On the top right there, you see a picture of 3 DJs. Those DJs were all Filipino cats from San Francisco called the Invisible Scratch Pickles. And I'm sure many of you know there's a culture of DJing in Sacramento and Northern California and Southern California. DJing, not just playing music for dancing, you know, at a school party, but like people who would battle and compete against one another. That was like very influential for me. And so it inspired me a lot. And on the bottom left is graffiti again. As I mentioned, that was something that, blew my mind. And then on the bottom right, I put a picture of something that's called the Battle of the Year, where breakdancers of any gender come together and compete as individuals, as two on twos, as entire crews. These four things were the main pillars of hip hop culture for me. And when I wasn't feeling reading, because I wasn't finding a reflection of myself, looking at these four pillars is what really got me like zoned in, and like you couldn't pull me away from it. It was like everything in my life. So the thing that made me get into wanting to tell stories and like really open my mind to reading again was becoming a parent. So when I was 24 years old, you see that picture on the left, that's when I was really young, much younger, 24. My son was born. He's 16 now. He's like a big dude. And then on the right is a picture of me more recently in 2018 with my daughter, who's now almost 3. And becoming a parent, becoming a father, it allows you to see the world through a brand new set of eyes. So when you, yourself as a child, and when you grow up to be an adult, there's lots of things that you know about the world and experience. But when you become a parent, or when you become a caretaker for someone who's very, very young, a baby or a child, you get to see all of the things that they find interesting and important. And when people were giving children's books to my children, I found that a lot of those things that I was talking about before, like reflections, like books that were like them, were still not that prominent. And I just thought I must be tripping. But I wasn't. On the left here, you see a picture of Barnes and Noble, um, where I used to go. I would say, let me go here and see if I can find some cool books for my son. And I found it really hard. I found it really tough. I personally come from a mixed background. My mom's Black, my dad's Mexican, Korean, and Apache. Of course, it's going to be difficult to find a book about a kid mixed with all those things. But just to find a book about Black children or Latino children or Asian American children or Native children, that was a really hard thing when my son was just a baby. Um, and like I said, I thought I was tripping. I thought I was like, you know, maybe I'm just exaggerating, but I came to find out later as I got into children's books and saying, it's whack that there aren't books like this. I want to make them. And so I started to learn as much as I could by reading tons and tons of books, lots of kids books. So if you look at this picture where you see all these books on the shelf, I've probably read like an entire bookstore of kids books just because I wanted to know what does a good book sound like? What's a good story? What are good illustrations? What makes kids, want to ask questions when I read it to them? Um, how do you make the art pop? Like, how do you make it fresh? I come from that world of graffiti. So how can I make the artwork, stand out from the other books? Um, so on the right here, you see an image that says the diversity gap in children's books. So I mentioned all those backgrounds that I have culturally. If you look at the bar graph that's there, there's two colors, there's white and gray. The gray represents the amount of children of color who are in kids books specifically, and the white represents all European American or white kids in children's books. And so if you look at that, it's very sparse, the representation of all these different cultures when it comes to kids books. And that right there is part of the reason why I felt like reading wasn't for me as a kid, because I just didn't see myself and I wasn't tripping. There is an actual nationwide lack of those books. If you look at the graph, the number of gray books is starting to increase. It's getting more and more, but there's still a long way to go. All right, so when it comes to kids books, there are lots of different types of books. And I'm just going to talk about the different ones here. So this book here that says A is for Activists, that's what we call a board book. It started off as a picture book, but it's more used as a board book now because it only has very few words. A board book is a book that you give to a baby or like a toddler or a child that is just learning to turn the pages on their own. And it's made with boards because it's less easy for them to destroy it. So kids, when they're really, really tiny, they want to nibble on the book, put it in their mouth. They may like throw it across the room, or they may drop it. They're just a little bit more rough with books. So you get them board books, so that way when they're looking through the book, it's sturdy, like it stands up to their strength, or their drool in this case. Um, the next book over that says My Papi Has a Motorcycle. This is a picture book. A picture book is usually for children who are just starting like preschool, so like ages 4 to 8. So like preschool up until when they get to, you know, second grade, maybe. My Papi Has a Motorcycle. This is a, a book about a girl, a Latina girl who, you know, her dad takes her and, you know, brings her around the neighborhood on her motorcycle. So that's a picture book. The next one that says Meet Yasmin, that's what we call an early reader. An early reader is for children around the age of 8, maybe like 6 to 10, who are just learning how to read. So they're learning how to read with a teacher or with a parent, or they're learning how to read with an adult, like, you know, just sometimes even reading on their own. Meet Yasmin, a book like that is very short. It's maybe like 50 pages, and the type on it is really big, so the kids can see it easily. Now on the bottom left, you'll see something that says Flight. Flight is what we call an anthology, and it's an anthology of comics, but not just any comics, of what we call all ages comics, meaning any age, elementary school, junior high, high school, can pick it up and find some enjoyment in it. Next to that is a book that's called Dragon Hoops. That's what you call a graphic novel. And a lot of graphic novels are comics, but like a little bit longer, maybe like 100 pages. And those are meant for, usually for, I would say, older elementary school students and junior high school students. Next to it is a comic that's called Bitter Root. Bitter Root is kind of like, I would say, junior high, high school age, because it has some violence in it. It has some scary things in it as well. So you wouldn't want to give it to a little kid, but someone who's been reading for a while. Next to it, Dragons in a Bag and The Hate You Give are both like YA books, or what we call young adult books. Those are books that you share with high school kids, really advanced readers in junior high, and even young adults who are just starting to go to college. And those books can have more intricate themes, more intricate backstories, more emotional weight. They can be more, what's the word? They can be really complicated, because as you get older, you're able to understand more and more of the story. So The Hate You Give, for example, was made into a film that's about police brutality. That's the weight of story. But even younger people could deal with it. It just depends on how they package it. So this is a bunch of different types of kids books. And as I said, I work mostly in picture books. So there's lots of different types of books out there. You know, going back to what I said about reflections and mirrors, it sucks, you know, like there's a system that exists that kind of keeps, you know, queer people, disabled people, people of color, Black folks, gender, non-binary folks from seeing reflections of themselves, from being able to feel seen, from being able to find stories that they can relate to. And it's not on accident. There's, you know, there's a large system, and a system is like, I mean, if you think of um, like a baseball team and like how they play the game, there's a system beyond like who hits the ball, who catches it, who coaches the team, who moves the ball around, who, you know, prepares the field and all that stuff. And in the country that we live in, there's a political system with very deep racist, sexist, homophobic, classist. These are all ways to discriminate against a certain type of people. And so the stories that have been told, whether they be in books or film or so many different forms of media, have been very, you know, very small, mostly about white males. And, you know, that can make people like myself, and maybe you too, I don't know if you feel this way, feel like that's not for me, or like I can't find something I get into or that I like. So in addition to talking about all those different types of kids books, I wanted to just let you know there are so many different types of really cool and awesome books out there. So, if you're getting the books that are in your classroom or that your parents or that adults are giving you, sure, you can read those. If you want, however, to look for books outside of those things of the kids book realm, there's even more than I could possibly explain to you in this call or in this presentation. But I wanted to start with some of these. So on the top left, there's a magazine there. It's called the New York Times. This is a magazine. The New York Times is a newspaper, but they're so big that they publish lots of other little things. And this is one of the magazines they publish. So remember I said before, the Source magazine, that was all about hip hop. There's magazines about makeup. There's magazines about cars. There's magazines about science, magazines about airplanes and, models and fashion. There's so many different types of magazines. I wouldn't settle just for what you find at Walmart or Target or your local chain store. I would go to um, any place that has magazines and look through what they have and see, you know, if you can find something that's related to what you like, because there are lots of different types of magazines. And you remember I said there's like a system that is kind of controlling the stories of like what gets reflected and what doesn't. This magazine here is called the 1619 Project, and this is about the history of America's foundation, which has a lot to do with slavery and the genocide of Native people. And this magazine right here is being banned right now. There's several states in the United States that are saying we will not let you share this magazine with young people because they're so scared of what knowledge is in it. So look for magazines. They don't have to be political. They could be fun magazines, anything. Magazines are really awesome. The one next to it says Chas Bojorquez. Chas Bojorquez, I don't know if any of you have ever seen cholo riding in your neighborhood. You can do a thumbs up if you've seen that before, but cholo riding started in San Jose, Southern California, and it exploded all across the US. Now there's cholos in Japan. There's cholos everywhere. But the writing is started with a very select few of artists, and Chas Bojorquez is one of those artists who started what we know as cholo writing. He did it before it was even used spray paint. He did it with brushes. And so this book right here is an art book. Now I chose Chaz because that's someone who I like, but you could choose anyone. There are people who make art books that are just about sneakers. They design sneakers, they market them, they sell them, they make nothing but cool sneakers. You could find an art book that's just about that. The point being, there are books that are only about art, and you could find the art of anything, automobile design, whatever. You could find the art of video game design, all of that. Art books. Take a note of art books if you can. Next one, the next to it, The Mandalorian, which is a Star Wars story. A lot of the things that we watch, TV shows, animated shows, films, reality TV shows, even sometimes streaming shows like YouTube shows, they have people behind the scenes that come up with the words. They have people that come up with like how it looks, the special effects, the design, the art. There are people who take time to compile all of that into a book or an art of book. So if you have a favorite show or favorite movie or favorite whatever, find out if there's an art book. It's very possible that there might be one. So art books of specifically related to, things that we watch visually like film or TV, they're out there. Next to it, I put another art book, which is spray can art. So I realize graffiti is not as popular now with young people as it was when I was a kid, but I'm just using that as an example. So if there's something very small and unique and niche that you like that not that many people know about, it's possible there's an art book about it. I think something that's interesting that you see right now online is lots of people roller skating, making videos, roller skating down the street in their bedroom, on the block. Like, I'm sure there's a book about roller skates out there somewhere. So that's one. The next thing is nonfiction. So nonfiction is basically what we know is like real life. And there's so many different genres of books beyond children's books and these things. There's horror, there's mystery, there's all those things. I'm more focusing on art books because that's what I like, and I'm an artist. So this book on the bottom left is what we call Chavez Ravine. So Chavez Ravine was a neighborhood, a community on the hills in Los Angeles that was uprooted, paved over, and like completely evicted so that they could build Dodger Stadium in LA. A lot of people don't know that where Dodger Stadium is used to be a Mexican Chicano neighborhood. And so this book is mostly of photographs, but it has some written testimony and history and articles in it as well. So there are books out there that are about history that are not just like all words, but pictures, like a mixture of things. So I chose that as an example of like, you could find something that's about where you come from or where your parents come from or where your family comes from that has photographs and words. That can be interesting, especially if you need to do homework or a history report or something like that. Next to it, going back to hip hop, this is a book that's called Legions of Boom. It's done by a guy named Oliver Wong. And what it is a book that's all about DJ sound systems. So one of the foundations of hip hop culture is what we call a sound system. And a sound system is not just like, you know, the speakers in your car or the speakers inside Soul Collective, but it's like taking DJ equipment, whether that be CDJs or turntables, and large, very loud speakers, tons of them, and plugging them up and putting them in a park or in a community center or in a hall or a school, and playing music loud, very loud, so people can hang out, they can talk to one another, they can dance. And this book, Legions of Boom, is all about the history of sound systems in the Bay Area. And I know for sure they have sound systems in Sacramento, in other parts like Turlock or Central Valley, Los Angeles. Anyway, it's a book that's about nonfiction. It's something that actually happened. Next to that, this is a book I just found today. It's called The Dynamics of Fashion. And I chose that because I like fashion, and I think it's cool to look fly when you get out. Even if you're going to go pick up the newspaper or some groceries, it's good to have on something that looks and feels good to you. It could be your hat, your sneakers, your dress or your pants, whatever. There are books out there that are specifically tailored to the fashion industry. You know, just about the outfits, just about the hats, just about the shoes, about the fabrics that they use, the factories where these things are made, the designers who come up with them. Point being is that there are books tailored to your specific interests. You just got to look for them. And lastly, on the bottom right, there is an old zine that's called Teen Angels. And a zine is basically a small self-published paper magazine. It's usually smaller, usually has less pages than a traditional magazine that you would get at the grocery store. But it's someone like me and you who was really interested in something, and they decided to put it all together into a paper thing and print it on their own and sell it and give it out on their own. So zines are really important places for reading as well. So these are a bunch of different types of books, hopefully that can like pique your interest to like have a love for reading. Reading doesn't have to be like a thick, boring history textbook. It could be, you know, mostly pictures. It could be half pictures. It could be a myriad of different things. Okay. So how do you find these books? How do you find these things? Okay. Number one, what do you like? What's of interest to you? When you're thinking of like, you know, I mean, like I was like, reading is whack. I don't want to do that. Now that I love reading, I'm like, anytime I come across someone who's not feeling it, I ask them, what do you like? What's interesting to you? What makes you really happy? What, when you see it, you like, I got to find out more about that. That is where you start finding your love of reading, is finding the things that really matter to you. Secondly, thinking about your family. What does your mom like? What does your dad like? If you have two moms or two dads, what do they like? If you live with your grandparents or your aunties, or maybe you live in a group home, or maybe you live with extended family, whatever, whoever the people you live with, what do they like reading? Through sharing your likes and seeing what they like, you can kind of have some interesting cross building going there where you get to learn a little bit more. So I put that family of people reading different books because they're not all reading the same thing. There's tons of pictures on the internet where it's like one family and they're all reading one thing, but I wanted to put an image where there's a bunch of different books on the table. I couldn't find a family of color, unfortunately. Sorry, y'all. But it's a family of different ages. There's older and younger people all looking at a different book. So it's helpful when it comes to like community to be able to share different types of books. All right. So here's another way that you can find really cool books. All right. Cons. A con is a short word for a convention. So there's a big one that happens in San Diego every year. It's called the San Diego Comic Con, and it is huge. Like I'm talking like 60, 70,000 people huge. Like, people up to their butts, up to their elbows, up to their neck, and like people wearing different costumes, people selling all types of comics, not just comics, but books as well. But that's a huge one. You don't have to go to the huge one. There are comic book conventions in Sacramento, in Los Angeles, in the Bay Area where I live. Lots of different cities have small ones that are in a library or a small gymnasium. Find conventions because they don't just have comics. They have other things there too. Sometimes they'll have fiction. Sometimes they'll have other books, art books. Find conventions, as many as you can. The one that I put here, it says the Schomburg Center's 7th Annual Black Comic Festival. That's one that happens in Harlem. But it's just an example. There are very specific types of comic conventions. And I would say go to as many different ones as you can, because when you get there, you may be able to see some really cool books that you would not have seen at the library or at the bookstore or at Wal Muerto or whatever. In the middle there, there's a guy that has a cart of books, and there's a bunch of books behind him. He's in a library. Librarians are one of the best resources for finding cool books, magazines, journals, zines, any of those things I talked about before. When I was a kid, I was, shy and timid to talk to librarians. And when I think about my son, who's a teenager now, he's like deathly scared of talking to librarians, doesn't want to talk to them at all. But librarians are really nice. They're really cool people. They're folks just like you and your adults that go up to them, say, I'm really into wrestling or whatever, coding, whatever it is that you're into. Go up to the librarian and say, I would love to find a book about this, and they will help you. It's their job not only to help you, but to know lots of different types of books. So librarians are one of your best resources to go and find new cool things to read. And like I said, not just books, magazines, zines, anything that you can read that is of interest to you is literacy, is good. On the left here, there's a picture of a bookstore. It's called Underground Books. That's in Sacramento. That's a Black-owned bookstore there in Sac. Go to bookstores. Ask your adult family member or caretaker to take you to a bookstore. Bookstore owners also have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to different subjects and different types of books, because they're the ones who buy them. They're the ones that order them. They're the ones that put them on the shelf. So they know tons and tons of different types of things. They're a wealth of knowledge, and you can just go up to them and ask them. And if they don't know, usually they'll help you find it. The picture that's on the bottom left there is of, you can't see me in it really because it's so small, but I'm in there with a whole bunch of Latino comic book creators. This event happened in Modesto, and it was just tons of comic book creators. There were other books there. There were zines. There were lowriders that were there. There were the little figurines, homies, the little ones that you would get in the vending machines. There was tons of people there who love stories. So conventions is a great way. Lastly, sharing it with your homies, your friends. This is a group of kids on the bottom right there that are all reading manga together. One of the best resources you can find for cool stuff to read are other people your age, like you. Be like, just share it with them, something that you've read. Say, hey, have you read this or that? What do you think of this? And then they'll share you, the stuff that they like. When I was a kid, it was music. Share the tapes, the mixtapes of whatever it is that you're interested in music wise. Okay. So one of the last things I will say before I leave it open for questions, and I hope you're thinking of some questions, is whose story is missing? I talked about windows and mirrors, being able to see yourself and to see others. But in Hollywood, movies, video games too, video games are notorious for this as well, and in books, there's a lot of stories that are missing. There's tons of people that we are not getting to know intimately, personally, who their stories are, who their families are, what their life is like. And because of that, people get really scared, and they are scared of those people, or they feel anger towards them, or they feel whatever. They feel something negative towards them because they don't know anything about them. They're ignorant about who these people are. And there are some awesome people that you know in your household, in your neighborhood, on your block, where you're from, that story might be missing. So one of the other things that you can do is to write your own story or illustrate your own story. Um, but be thinking about whose story is missing. Is yours missing? Is there a book out there that's just like you? If not, you can also make your own story. And this goes beyond just books. You can make your own game or movie or whatever. But I put a bunch of different types of people here just to say whose story is missing. And I even myself, I actually forgot to put someone in here who is disabled, maybe in a wheelchair, or maybe they walk with crutches, or maybe they have a disability that's invisible that we don't know. But the point being, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, your gender, your sexual orientation, your interests, your language, is your story there? Is your family represented? If not, you got to go find it. And if you can't find it, it would be really cool if you made it. Okay, so that's it. It is now 6:45 almost. And if you want to get at me beyond just leaving some room for questions, this is my Instagram right here. You can see the handle there. That's my website, and then that's my email. So any of you are welcome to hit me up, ask me questions. I'm more than happy to share um, whatever I can with you. And beyond all those other things that I mentioned, Instagram is a really good place to find books too, because there are people who are nuts, like super juiced about magazines or books or whatever, and they make whole Instagram pages all about that. And you can just scroll through and be like, "Ooh, I like that one. I like that one." Anyway, does anybody have questions? And I'm gonna stop sharing the screen now.
I do have a question, please.
Yeah.
Hi, do you know of any children's books about children with autism?
Yes, I do. If you have a pencil ready, there's a
I'm
book,
ready.
an author, her name is Zetta Elliott, and I think it's called Johnny Doesn't Like to Be Hugged or something like that. I'll look for the link and put it in the chat. You can see the chat, right?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, there's a bunch of books about kids with autism, but let me see if I can find it. Anybody else have a question?
Oh, sorry.
All right, I will ask.
I have a question.
Yep, shoot.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what Trust Your Struggle is.
Sure. So Trust Your Struggle is an artist collective. And what that means basically is it's a group of friends, a family, a crew. A collective is just another, just like Soul Collective, it's just another word for a group of people. All of us, we got together through our love of graffiti art, fine art, murals, illustration, and our love of social justice. So social justice being, a critique, an analysis, an understanding of the issues that we as a society face, like, for example, sexism, like discrimination against women, unequal pay for women, sexual harassment, police brutality. These are different social issues that we would talk about in our artwork, in large murals or in small gallery shows. So if you ever get a chance to go to the Soul Collective, you might see a future show with some of our work. But did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, Bree said, shout out to Mama Rose from Underground Books. Yeah, Underground Books is a great store, a great resource for you all. Okay, anybody else have a question? You don't have to ask me about books. You could ask me something else if you want.
What were the books that you have? I know there was a picture. Is it still there? Those are the books that you illustrated, or were you the author to all of those?
Okay, I'll show that image again. So I'm an illustrator first and author second. So more of them I've illustrated, but a few I wrote as well. So I'll look for that image right now. Okay, so this is a bean and cheese taco birthday. That's a book that I illustrated for another author. I Am Salsa Creek is also a book that I illustrated for another author. For Khan's First Flat Top is a book that I both wrote and illustrated. And then One of a Kind Like Me is a book that I illustrated for another author. And I mentioned those four first because they're both in English and Spanish. And then the other two that are there, Sam, 13 Ways of Looking at a Black Boy, those I illustrated for another author. And then the same one with Alejandria Fights Back, also for another author. Did you want me to leave this up for a second?
No, that's good. Thanks.
Okay. Someone else have a question?
I just wanted to make a comment. I remember like about 2-3 years ago, maybe more. I remember going to see you in Oakland, and then we bought the Ferdinand's first, or the flat top book. What was it called?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
where was it?
it was in Oakland. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Was it a gallery show or was it a book thing?
It was something with books. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, cool. Right on.
Yeah, I was with both of my brothers, and then just wanted to say I remembered that, and that was a book that my mom read to us.
Oh, cool. Right on.
Yeah.
What happened? All right. Anybody else have interest and questions?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I can't make out what you're saying. Are you saying zine books, or can you spell what you're saying? Say it one more time.
Zines?
Uh,
I'll write it in the chat. Can you see that?
No, sir. We froze up. Can you? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So a zine is a self-published paper magazine, short for magazine. That's, it could be about music or, mechanics or art. Could be about travel. So many things. But those are really good things, especially if it's like, I would say they're a little bit better for teenagers, like especially if they're like, I'm not messing with any of all those other things. You can find a zine that's very specific to what they're looking for.
And on the Soul Collective YouTube channel, we have a YouTube about how to make zines. So
Okay, is anybody else? So Crystal F, are you a parent? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I
Awesome.
am.
Any other parents here?
this is Can. I'm a parent, but I'm on with Soraya too.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to share a website that you can look at for kids books that has a good variety. It's called Social Justice Books. I'll find the website and then put it in the chat so you can check it out. Parents, do you have any questions? If any of you have like a reluctant reader, or maybe you just need help finding more books. Okay, any teenagers here? You can unmute yourself and just say something if you're a teenager or a young person. Yes, I know. I know you are. Anyone else who's a young person on here?
I'm a teenager.
Hey, what's up, Savannah? Did you have any questions or any comments?
I was wondering, what's your favorite unappreciated novel?
Favorite unappreciated novel? Okay, it's one about vampires. It's called Fledgling. Fledgling is a story by an author by the name of Octavia Butler, and it's about a young Black girl who's maybe, I don't know, 13 or something like that. She looks like she's 13, but she's actually 50 years old, And the story starts with her waking up in pain. She's been knocked out and attacked, and she has, you know, part of her skull is hit, and she's very badly injured. And she heals rapidly, like very quickly. And the story is about her figuring out, because she has amnesia from how she's been attacked, who did this to her, who she is, and what the hell is going on, basically. So she finds out that she's part of a family of vampires, and it's a very interesting ride because the people who did this to her, well, I won't say anymore, but it's a really good book. It's called Fledgling.
Can you put it in the chat, actually?
Sure.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, anybody else have a question, a concern, or a critique?